It is 1 a.m. in Washington, 6 in Berlin, and 2 on a Friday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Geun-hye. Here are the top stories making headlines at this hour. President Park Geun-hye continues her push for a Korean reunification in the former East German city of Dresden. There, she is expected to unveil a new vision for unification with North Korea. The UN Security Council condemns North Korea's recent ballistic missile launch as a violation of UN resolutions. And South Korea, the U.S. and Japan will hold high-profile security meetings next month in Washington. Now this following trilateral summit talks in The Hague earlier this week. We'll have those stories and more, but our top story this Friday afternoon, President Park Geun-hye's state visit to Germany. The Korean leader is waking up to her fourth day in Germany and today in the former Eastern Germany city of Dresden. Now, the day before, on day 3 of her state visit to the European country, reunification continued to top the president's agenda. She visited the remains of the Berlin Wall and met with the leaders of German reunification to listen to their experience. Our Choi Yu-sun is traveling with the president, and she filed this report from Dresden.
President Park, the leader of the world's only divided nation, visited a highly symbolic site of unity and freedom. Berlin's East Side Gallery is what's left of the Berlin Wall, covered in painted murals by more than 100 artists from around the world to commemorate the 1989 fall of the wall that led to German unification. The South Korean president also visited a photo exhibition that compares scenes from the demilitarized zone on the Korean peninsula and Germany's Grünes Bund, which is now an ecological park. The president had proposed turning the DMZ into something similar.
우리 나라의 DMZ도 언젠가는 평화의 상징으로 바뀌는 그런 날이 올 것이다 하는 그런 희망과 기대를 갖게 됩니다.
Staying with her reunification campaign, President Park met 5 former and current officials who were at the center of German unification, asking them to share their insights and wisdom. The group told the president there were frequent people exchanges between the East and the West that eventually led to a peaceful reunification. They said the German case is different from the situation on the Korean peninsula in that East Germans themselves had wanted change. At a luncheon with Korean and German businessmen, President Park vowed to prepare the Korean peninsula for a peaceful reunification. She then asked the business community to do their part in achieving a successful economic integration between the two Koreas. President Park is now in Dresden for the second leg of her state visit. Here, she is expected to lay out details of her reunification policy during a speech on Friday. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News, Dresden.
Now, as our Choi Yu-sun just reported, President Park is expected to unveil her vision of a Korean reunification in Dresden at the Dresden University of Technology. Now, Dresden is a symbolic city in German reunification as some of the most decisive events which led to the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and then German reunification in 1990 took place there. Arirang News will bring you a live coverage of her speech in Dresden at roughly 6:30 p.m. Korea time. Now, the nation is all ears for President Park's upcoming speech in the German city of Dresden, where she is expected to, like I said, unveil her vision for reunification on the Korean peninsula. The location plays a significant role since Korea looks at Germany's unification as a model for its own. Arirang News' Kwon So-ah tells us what we can learn from the German case and what challenges remain.
Similar in many ways, but different in others. For a long time, the case of Germany's unification has been seen as a possible model for unification on the Korean peninsula. However, the biggest difference between Korea and Germany is the difference between South and North Korea. While East Germans were practically crying out for unification, South and North Koreans are divided on the issue. This is why analysts say trust will play a big role in laying the groundwork for successful unification.
Trust from the North Korean people, trust from the international community, and then trust from ourselves. These 3 trust factors combined will make unification possible.
Experts say the difference between the culture and lifestyle of the two Koreas must be transformed into a sense of intimacy without pressing the North's people to change. South Koreans need to be convinced unification will enhance Korea's image, attract foreign investment, and eventually make a stronger economy. Also, just like Britain, France, and the US agreed to Germany's reunification, Korea must receive consensus from nations concerned, namely the US, Japan, China, and Russia. Although experts do not think Koreas will become one overnight like in Germany's case, there are lessons to be learned.
Germany did not actually prepare for a reunification, but as West Germany liquidated the Nazis, they achieved a civil society and transparent politics, which eventually made them an advanced democratic nation. Also, they achieved the miracle on the Rhine River that made them a world economic leader.
North Korea's weak economy means the North would gain a great deal through reunification, but its constant provocations and unpredictability could prove a thorn in the side of progress on the matter. Experts say that while North Korea has expressed an interest in reunification, it doesn't want to play second fiddle to the South during the process. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Representatives from South Korea, Japan, and U.S. will soon meet in Washington to discuss the North Korean nuclear threat. The nuclear negotiators from the three nations. Now, this is part of a follow-up action from the Nuclear Security Summit when the leaders met on the sidelines in The Hague earlier this week. Our Shin Se-min explains.
South Korea and Japan may not share the same understanding of history, but one thing they do have in common is a desire to keep the peace in Northeast Asia. Seoul's defense ministry said Friday that South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. will hold defense trilateral talks on April 17th and 18th. They will include the deputy defense ministers from the three nations and represent the sixth such talk since 2008. At the center of the discussions will be North Korea's continued nuclear and missile threats. The nuclear program will also be a point of emphasis when the top nuclear negotiators from South Korea, the U.S., and Japan sit down for talks soon. No further details have been released. The official says discussions will center on strengthening cooperation against North Korea's nuclear threat and the possible restart of six-party talks. The defense talks next month and the future meeting between nuclear negotiators were both proposed earlier this week when the leaders of three countries met on the sidelines of the Nuclear Security Summit in The Hague. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the UN Security Council has strongly condemned North Korea's recent ballistic missile launches, calling them a clear violation of existing resolutions. Global powers, however, are less clear about what to do next. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The UN Security Council has spoken with one voice on North Korea's launch of two mid-range ballistic missiles earlier this week. Expressing deep concern after a closed-door meeting on Thursday, the 15-nation council said it would hold consultations and respond appropriately to Pyongyang's latest provocation. The Council's president, Luxembourg's UN ambassador Sylvie Lucas, said it was a clear violation of Security Council resolutions. Despite concerns that they wouldn't, North Korea's biggest ally, China, supported the statement, but only to a point. Experts say it's unlikely Beijing will give its backing to additional economic sanctions on the North. In 2006 and 2009, the Security Council slapped three sanctions, banning the North from launching any type of missile that has ballistic capabilities. They followed North Korea's first and second nuclear tests. The Security Council expanded sanctions after another nuclear test in February of last year. North Korea fired two medium-range Nodon ballistic missiles into the East Sea in the early hours of Wednesday morning, Korea time. It was the first such mid-range missile launch since 2009. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And the United Nations isn't the only one mulling over additional sanctions on Pyongyang. U.S. Congress wants to hit the leadership with more punitive measures for its brutal repression and abuse of the North Korean people. Connie Kim reports.
The United States is attempting to fast-track legislation to impose fresh sanctions against North Korea for its grave human rights abuses. Speaking at a congressional hearing on North Korea, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Ed Royce, said Washington will take every measure to hold the North Korean leader and his aides responsible for crimes against humanity. The bill is designed to directly affect the regime by cutting Kim Jong-un off from his hefty finances. It includes plans to ban financial institutions and other countries from having any kind of trade or cash transactions with Pyongyang. This would have a significant effect as North Korea is believed to have billions of dollars tucked away in various tax havens. The legislation, dubbed the North Korea Sanctions Enforcement Act of 2013, was proposed by Royce in April last year to further isolate Pyongyang from the international financial system. However, a report published by the U.S. Congressional Research Service suggests the bill could cause friction with South Korea, especially if Seoul decides to expand its joint Kaesong industrial complex with North Korea. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, a North Korea expert from the U.S. is sounding a fresh alarm about the nuclear threat posed by Pyongyang. Patrick Cronin, a senior advisor from the Center for a New American Security, says armed conflicts could be sparked on the peninsula if South Korea and the U.S. fail to stop North Korea's nuclear program, and the window is small. Now, Cronin said that the North could deploy strategic nuclear weapons within just 3 years. Although he acknowledged Seoul and Washington have a stronger combined military, Cronin questioned whether they'd be fully prepared if a war were to suddenly break out. Now, he urged South Korea and the U.S. prepare for any uncertainties that may stem from the Kim Jong-un regime.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Moon Gon-young live from Seoul.
About shopping market. For the dual use of the Korean name East Sea and Japanese name Sea of Japan in school textbooks in the state of Virginia. Korea's industrial output dropped in February for the second straight month, raising concerns the domestic economy is not, in fact, on track to a strong recovery. Well, business sentiment among Korean manufacturers last month also remained weak. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
Korea's economic conditions might not be improving as quickly as many had hoped. Statistics Korea said Friday that the nation's industrial output shrank 1.8% last month from January, marking the second straight month of decline. The agency attributed the drop in output to slowing production in the nation's auto sector, which fell more than 7% in February on month. It cited fewer exports of Korean automobiles to the United States due to the harsh winter there and consumers waiting for the scheduled release of new models. The agency added that the decline is most likely temporary because the output numbers from January to February improved from the fourth quarter last year. Experts, however, remain dubious about the strength of the recovery this year. They say the domestic economy faces an uphill battle in trying to maintain the pace of recovery seen in the second half of last year.
If the economic growth rate reaches 1% every quarter this year from a quarter earlier, like the second half of 2013, the economy will be able to expand over 4% this year. But for now, that remains questionable.
The Bank of Korea data also showed that business sentiment among Korean manufacturers remained weak last month. Although the index reached 81, up from 78 in February, the reading is still below the benchmark 100, which means there are more pessimists than optimists. The central bank expects the Korean economy to grow 3.8% this year after a 3% growth last year. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Well, despite slow economic growth, a majority of Korean lawmakers and high-ranking government officials seem to be enjoying their share of the pie. According to data released by the Ethics Committee of the country's legislative, legal, and administrative bodies, 60% of more than 2,300 officials saw their wealth increase last year. Now, the jump was attributed to a rise in the appraised value of land and personal savings. The average wealth of the officials stood at roughly $1.2 million, although they do not include 4 lawmakers whose net worth totaled over $46 million each. President Park Geun-hye's total assets came to over $2.6 million as of 2013, up $250,000 from the previous year. The nation's financial authorities are gearing up for stricter guidelines on how customer information is shared between financial holding companies and their affiliates. The Financial Service Commission and the Financial Supervisory Service are reportedly looking into instituting the changes as soon as May. Now, under the new restrictions, financial institutions would need to get prior consent from customers before sharing their personal information to other parties. They would also have to use client numbers instead of resident registration numbers. And the changes were spurred after the personal data of up to 20 million Koreans was leaked from 3 credit card firms in January. The International Monetary Fund has agreed to provide up to $18 billion in loans for Ukraine, which, along with aid from the international community, will add up to roughly $27 billion in total assistance in the next 2 years. Our Kim Min-ji explains.
The International Monetary Fund on Thursday approved a bailout of up to $18 billion for Ukraine, throwing a much-needed lifeline to the crisis-stricken nation. Ukraine has been on the verge of default since the ousting of former President Viktor Yanukovych cut off $15 billion in aid from Russia. In a statement, the IMF said the 2-year package is expected to unlock more loans from the international community, including the U.S. and the European Union, to a total of about $27 billion. In return for the cash injection, Kiev has promised to undertake stringent economic, energy, and financial reforms. Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk said the nation's economy could contract by up to 10% this year without IMF support. On Wednesday, the new government agreed to raise the price of domestic gas by 50% from May, a demand of the IMF. U.S. President Barack Obama welcomed the IMF agreement, calling it a major step forward that would help stabilize Ukraine's economy. U.S. Congress on Thursday also overwhelmingly passed bills that provide $1 billion in loan guarantees to Ukraine and impose sanctions on Russia for its actions in Crimea. Moscow officially annexed Crimea following a referendum on March 16th. The United Nations has also thrown its support behind Ukraine. It approved a non-binding resolution that affirmed Ukraine's territorial integrity and called the Russian-backed referendum vote for Crimea's secession illegal. The largely symbolic resolution was backed by 100 countries, with 11 voting against and 58 abstentions. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And taking a brief look at how the local stock market is doing at this hour, Seoul shares edged up to their strongest level in 12 weeks in early trading on this Friday, reversing earlier losses as foreigners changed to become net buyers. However, by 1:30 p.m. Korea time, it had paired earlier gains, trading nearly flat at 1977 after hitting an intraday high of 1985.5, which is the highest level since January 3rd. The tech-heavy KOSDAQ was trading higher by 0.3%, while on the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency was trading stronger against the greenback at roughly 1,069 won. The hunt for the missing Malaysia Airlines jetliner continues. The Australian Maritime Safety Authority, helming the search along the southern corridor, said it will, quote, shift its search to an area 1,100 kilometers northeast based on a new credible lead, an analysis of radar data that showed the plane was flying faster than previously thought. And that is the direction search planes took to after being grounded yesterday afternoon due to bad weather and poor visibility. Now, today's mission takes off amidst news that Thailand and Japan have sent new satellite sightings of potential debris zones to Malaysian authorities. Thailand's satellite images showed some 300 floating objects, the largest suspected cluster yet, the objects ranging in the size from 2 to 15 meters. Japan said its satellite on Wednesday located some 10 objects near the same area. It will likely take several more days to process that data. Now, on a different note, Microsoft has unveiled a special touch-first version of Office for the iPad. The company's chief executive officer, Satya Nadella, debuted the software suite Thursday that will run on Apple's tablet PC. Now, the suite includes Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. The read-only version of Office for iPad will be available as a free application. To create and edit documents, users will have to subscribe to Microsoft's cloud-based service, Office 365.
You can see I even have tables and
And now it's time for our daily arts and culture segment. Now, these days we've been enjoying early summer-like weather conditions here in the Korean capital and all across the nation. And a lot of people have been enjoying their activities outdoors with the beautiful weather. And what we Koreans like to do or do best is taking photographs outside of ourselves and each other. So we have Im Yoon-hee in the studio, and she will tell us a little bit about where to take these beautiful photos. Good afternoon to you, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon. So yes, the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism has this program. They've been running since 2011, where they gather the 25, they view the 25 most beautiful picturesque places to take these pictures.
So you're going to be telling us about where to take photos and which locations would make the best photographic moments, yeah?
Exactly. So they range anywhere from waterfalls, lakes, and mountains. And so there are quite a few locations here in Korea. So let's take a look at what they view is the best place to take a picture fit for a frame.
The beautiful lotus flower is an iconic flower in Asia. This year's lotus flower gets an early start in the beautiful waters of Kungnam-ji Pond, located in the southern part of Chungcheongnam-do Province. The majestic peaks of Wolchusan Mountains span across the southern Jeonnam-do Province, tucking away pockets of fog and mystery. Here, the abandoned fortress that once sheltered King Injo now caresses the empty mountain terrain, snuggled deep within Gyeonggi-do Province. The Gosam Chosuji Reservoir is a popular fishing place with its serene landscape. And finally, the Yeongchu Falls takes the breath away. Located in Mullung Valley, which also houses Mullung Rocks, these rocks were inscribed with the names of poets and scholars who frequented the valley years ago. These are just a few of the beautiful landscapes here in Korea worth visiting. With some beautiful weather and some comfortable hiking shoes, you can be sure you'll get some picture frame-worthy shots.
You know, what we take for granted here in Korea is that we have all 4 seasons that are very distinctive, and, you know, each of these locations would look very different according to the season, and a lot of these places seem like hiking locations.
Yeah, so Korea is actually 70% mountainous terrain, and so a lot of hiking locations here in Seoul as well. But if it's always nice to go outside of the city and take a break for a day or two.
Well, I'm wondering, how were these locations chosen?
So the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, they chose these locations by getting applications from the park or the facility itself or from the local government. And from there, they choose the 25 locations that they view would best be fit for these pictures.
You know, it's always great to see wonderful photographs, taken by professional or amateur photographers, but sometimes it's really nice to be the photographer yourself and, take landscape pictures or pictures of, of each other, of friends and family. like in the landscape. And, especially now with the warm weather, I think it would really be a great time for us to go take photos.
Exactly, and some of these locations would be beautiful for that. So we saw in the report the lotus flowers, and we saw in the pond earlier. So those are actually supposed to be late spring, summer flowers. But because of this warm weather, we're kind of seeing them a little bit earlier. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw many more blooms of these beautiful lotus flowers, perfect for pictures.
Well, Geun-hye, next time I hope you would bring us some locations inside the nation's capital, because we have some beautiful places in the capital where we can take photographs of, and you can give us a list of where to take photos in Seoul.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you, Geun-hye, for that.
My pleasure.
And that is all from me at this hour. Thank you for watching. I'll be back with Business Today at 4 p.m. Korea time. See you then.